Click links joint channel here over at SubScribeStar. So the Acolyte, as an example of why Hollywood, I feel, is finished, and the actor gets on, does an interview, and whines about a lot of things, but is not producing receipts. Says she welcomes criticism. Do you? Do you really? So everything Hollywood is doing is wrong, assuming their goal is to sell tickets. Some of it is because social media is allowing these self-absorbed actors to speak directly without a public relations person cleaning things up. And, I don't know when social media started. 2000, rough. I mean, like when MySpace was, I think, 2006. But it's really the full saturation of smartphones with big enough screens that you can actually use. So the iPhone, I guess the original one, and then the Samsung S3, I think, was. So it was really like 2010, and then Facebook, where people were doing everything on social media. It was new, and they were like posting their lunches on there. It's just the stupidest stuff imaginable. So I go, I think, like, well, is your goal to sell tickets? Because you're not acting like you want to sell tickets. But what social media did was let you realize how important the public relations people were back before social media, because they were giving you a very carefully curated view of the actor, and that was not the actor. That was just the image of the actor, but that was good enough, and you thought they were so glamorous. And it's like, yeah, that's all nonsense. It's all Hollywood magic. You don't want to know who the people are, because most of the time they're just some of them are great people, but a lot of them are just the most self-absorbed, narcissistic people you could imagine. So the PR people cleaning things up, Hollywood should really try to bring that back. But part of it is Hollywood is shrinking in total, I think, but it's also they used to have fewer. They used to have big projects that were huge projects, and even the medium-sized projects were still big projects. But now they have, and people were getting paid in proportion to those monster projects. But now they have many more projects, but they're much smaller, and the salaries are being affected by that. Where someone was in California, there's some article about people are leaving Hollywood, they're moving out of California, because it used to be something like, adjusting for inflation, someone would be doing something in Hollywood and say it was like $300,000 a year, and they were living in LA, and that's fine. That was fine. But then before, like, streaming has taken away the energy from big projects, because there's only so many people, so you're spreading these shows out to much smaller shows, and the salaries have to go down to accommodate that. But the cost of living in California, it just keeps going up. So suddenly, where there are things we're doing, these actors are, whoever, there's like thousands of people who work on the movies and shows, where they were doing fine at $300K, suddenly it drops down to like $120K, and believe it or not, in parts of LA, that's that's really rough. And the inflation is causing some article where the rent went from like $2,500 to $3,500 or something crazy like that, and they realize, oh, this is just the future direction of Hollywood, coupled with California, Gavin Newsom, and all that kind of stuff, where they realize it's time to leave Hollywood for sure, or at least leave California and start looking into doing something else. Anyway, so everything Hollywood is doing is wrong if the goal is to sell advertising or sell a subscription service. But the actors and even the directors don't seem to be aware how that works, because they think that they can make these crappy shows and then attack the audience, and somehow people will watch the show as a result of them doing these stupid self-absorbed interviews. And that cycle has repeated often enough, and it's never worked to retain an audience. So this actor is doing interviews, and she's whining about how everyone hates the Acolyte. And the thing is, the show is obviously not her fault. It's Disney's. All she has to do is be nice, smile, accept the paycheck, and move on to something else when it gets canceled after the first season. So that way, the bad show doesn't stick to her. People have a positive impression of her. And then you do these interviews, and the only thing she's doing with these interviews is preaching to the choir of other SJWs. So the mindset now is so totally different from old Hollywood. It's as if they feel that selling the show isn't their responsibility. And I've heard a lot of those people who worked in mainstream comics, they had that same viewpoint. And you just have to say to them, But if the comics you're working on don't sell, then you're not going to be working on those comics. You see that, right? And I honestly, I don't understand the mind of a lot of these SJWs. So they do the interview to sell themselves, and then they virtue signal about whatever is topical. Actors seem to be the worst combination of participation, trophy generation, mixed with insane levels of narcissism. And partially, this is because if they're a pox, it almost doesn't matter what they say, because in this current cultural Bolshevik culture, the expectations for them are almost zero. The only thing they're not allowed to do is take the wrong side in the two conflicts that are occurring now. That I guess people forgot all about Russia, Ukraine for that other one, and it's absolutely bizarre to me to hear I think it's Ewan McGregor, who the character played Obi-Wan, and he did that show, another show that I don't think anyone watched, and this chick and others are doing interviews that would cause conflict with the audience and alienate the buyer. And that's the thing to keep in mind, is that the fans, they're not fans. I mean, they're buyers, they're customers, and Hollywood is the seller. So when they do these interviews and they talk about some straw man situation where the critics are istophobic, hateful people, how does that, may or may not be true. I think a lot of it's a straw man, but how does that sell the show to people who view the actor sitting in his Tesla, from his $1 million mansion, $10 million mansion in L.A., saying that if you don't like a black actor, then you're phobic? How exactly does that translate into sales? How does that help the show in any capacity at all? There are people, obviously, who don't like different types of people. That's pretty well common all over the earth. But when the actor is whining about it, it doesn't get those viewers back, and it doesn't get new viewers because he's not discussing how kick-ass the show is. He's talking about something that most viewers don't care about at all. I don't care if the actor is getting crapped on online for their sex, religion, ethnicity. I just don't give a flying rat's ass. All I want to hear is about how much you love the show and how kick-ass it is. You should be all smiles and selling the hell out of the show. I would have assumed that actors would have known this, but it seems like the last 10, 15 years, just people went crazy. I mean, TDS 2016 has a lot to do with it, too. So when the actor whines about being criticized, my first thought is, wow, what a whiny pussy. Maybe stop being such a bleeding vagina. Then I think they're lying, or at most, out of the millions of people that watch the show and are terminally online, maybe someone criticized them mildly, like the actor's ethnicity wasn't a good fit for the show or something like that. And to me, that's a perfectly fair criticism, because they want to see someone who fits the original scheme and vibe of the artist's original intention. In this case, 77 Star Wars, but in Rings of Power, it was Lord of the Rings. And they kind of set themselves up that any criticism, so they say they welcome criticism, but then they set the parameters for it, and they realize, you don't welcome criticism, do you? Like, not at all, if you're setting preconditions on what the criticism may entail. So if in current this cultural Marxism now, any criticism of a non-European actor or character is dangerous. It's dangerous hate speech, which is a threat to our democracy, which just makes me also call them ethnic and religious slurs, because now they deserve it for being such lispy, self-absorbed pussies. We all get abused online. Racial, religion, sex, everything is on the table, but it's only recently that people decided that it was so super surreal that they had to go whine to people about it in an interview. It's just a whole worldview perspective shift, because we don't care about the things that they care about, and we know it's a way to manipulate the audience. They framed the argument that if there's any criticism of a non-blonde actor, it's a hate crime. So why don't you just stick to using blonde actors? How dare you suggest something so reasonable? But the whole thing is a weird deflection from the fact that the shows are woke Bolshevik cancer. Think about it this way. Say a sector of the audience doesn't think that this non-Euro actor fits the role, and they unsubscribe from Disney Plus, which is a monthly streaming service. Then the actor cries about it online like a pussy. It doesn't get those people back. They don't care. And does it get new people to watch the show? I don't think so. All it does, I think, is take people who are on the fence about the show to also stop watching. I mean, when they do these interviews and they bitch and moan about these things, has the show ever turned around? I don't think. Did that Obi-Wan show get a second season? I don't think so, because the actor is coming across like an asshole and using some mild criticism to bitch and moan, and it's just the place of privilege for these actors. We all get criticism online. That, well, it's not, should not be your first day on the internet. Arguing and attacking the audience doesn't bring in new people. They're just going to be some of the audience who's turned off by the actor's attitude, because the whole thing feels like a straw man, so they just stop watching. At one time, pre-social media, what sweet times those were, Hollywood at least had the illusion of carefully managed glamour because they had an image to protect, and that was what public relations was for. It didn't matter what the actor's life was behind the scene. Nobody cared. The actor is just playing a role. And, back in the day, they were partying hard. So all that is over. Now actors are social activists who have, in their minds, a responsibility to use their platform to virtue signal on issues, as long as they're safe issues and won't affect their money or fame, which is why they're suspiciously silent on real issues like the Israel-Palestine type of thing, because that's a real issue that would require courage to advocate for. And there's no courage in Hollywood. So they break their arms patting themselves on the back for saying what is approved by their puppet masters. They say Black Lives Matter as if that means anything. John Boyega from the Star Wars thing, I forget what did he play? Finn, I think. And he's saying like every corporation, every public whatever business of, and every financial institution, every entertainment institution, everything that has a public footprint was waving the BLM flag from 2020 for a couple of years. And he's standing up and saying, I don't care what happens to me, Black Lives Matter. Yeah, that's what everyone else is saying. That's why would you think you're doing something brave? If you said all lives matter, you'd be doing something brave. I mean, that's like how bizarre these that's how deep in an echo chamber actors are. So when the actors are whining about critics being phobic to them, it rings hollow. It's much ado about nothing, because we all experience racism. That's life on Earth. But actors feel they have some unique experience with it because they're surrounded by yes people. There are solid reasons not to want a pox in a show, because we had those pesky little BLM riots in 2020, which caused the great Hollywood mask-off Super Mary Sue pox nonsense. If you have a fair-skinned, light-eyed character, a beautiful person of the light, he is allowed nuance, depth, and an ability to grow. A pox, POC, is a Mary Sue. They have to be perfect, which is boring. And the background events of riots for that junkie thug and people protesting for peace by burning buildings with people in them and shooting children and looting stores. Then they do interviews whinging and moaning. The audience just doesn't care anymore. So all these factors add up, and I don't see Hollywood in general having a come to Jesus moment, or for them, Moloch, in deciding to turn things around. So Hollywood is probably just going to continue to shrink while alternative forms of entertainment steal market share. Or Hollywood will, like I said, there'll be fewer of those big movies, the Barbie and Oppenheimer, huge hits, Batman and that kind of stuff, where there's these huge movies, and then they're just spreading out to lots and smaller shows where it's the line between people doing social media and people doing this lower end of Hollywood with these streaming shows is maybe going to blur a little bit. Though I don't know. I mean, even the streaming shows like the Acolyte, I think it's something like $20 million an episode, and people are looking at the show, and even with inflation, they're looking at the show and like, this shouldn't cost you this much to do an episode for $20 million. And Disney's still putting a lot of money into shows in it, like Star Wars or Marvel's events, and then you talk about it, it's like, oh yeah, they spent $240 billion on what was it, Secret Wars with I forget that guy's name, the black guy, Fury character who obviously race swapped their real character, and it turns out nobody saw it, and it's like that with a lot of the Marvel and Star Wars shows. So I hear the SJW's cringe arguments where they consider shows are nothing more than a vector to push propaganda, and they talk about representation being so important to them. But all you have to do is turn it around and say, oh yeah, I totally agree. I want to see my tribe on screen also. And modern Disney doesn't honor that. I mean, talk like the same smarmy SJW, NPR uptick voice like they do, where you have to pretend to take yourself seriously about, saying the most absurd things. Because if everyone wants representation, that's the SJW's Frankfurt School Saul Alinsky argument, then shows would eventually have to turn into just all black or all European or all Asian shows. That's just using their own argument against them. They go, no, we want diversity, but I thought what happened to representation? If we started to argue like they do, that portrayal of European people in a negative light perpetuates dangerous anti-white hateful stereotypes, and it would be more respectful if any negative portrayal was done using non-European actors. Obviously, they would lose their effing mind if you said something like that, which is probably why I lose Twitter accounts so often. They're not going to do that, which is why it feels like Hollywood is just going to keep making woke cancer, but fewer and fewer people are going to watch it. And, every once in a while they'll have those breakout Barbie type of things. But the infrastructure is another issue, because movie theaters have to have enough to maintain their footprint. And I don't see a way for that to happen. So if they kind of start shutting down, you're going to get I guess what they'll do is they'll convert to making the theater experience, where it'll be more expensive tickets for higher quality screens and nicer chairs, whatever they call those type of those theaters. But the other thing is, like, you would look at the movies, and the movies have to be worth a $40 ticket for these kind of things, and almost nothing is. Like, would Barbie be the exception? So if the infrastructure goes away, then you don't have those big budget movies, and they can't afford to put them on streaming shows, I don't think, unless they did like a pay-per-view thing. So you're probably going to get, that's why I say I think you're going to see a massive transition in Hollywood, which is fine, because look at me, we are the Hollywood now, because we have alt media to try to counter this message. Because this is what Hollywood is. Even you think of these escapist movies, which used to be more escapist movies, and now are just getting so heavy-handed with the propaganda. You can counter that narrative by just making your own, doing your own streaming videos. And every minute somebody's watching an Odyssey live stream is a minute they're not watching the mainstream brainwashing. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.